thank you very much, everyone. Geez, it's been a wonderful event so far. How many of you saw the first session yesterday with Steve Sammartino? Yes. For any of you who have to present after Steve, it's really quite decimating. In fact, he kind of destroyed me right from the first event. But I did go home last night and, try to emulate him a little bit. Called my kids dude. Drank about 25 cups of coffee on my way in. And of course, I peaked about 10 o'clock. And now I'm a wreck. Anyway, didn't realise that had been going. So I've only got 30 minutes, so this might be a bit of a whirlwind. And like many of us, I've probably prepared too many slides, so there may be a bit of a panic attack in the last 5 or 10 minutes. Leading the shifting boundaries of online learning. It's an interesting topic. I think anyone who engages in any sort of e-learning or any sort of transition to a digital learning approach are essentially dealing with boundaries and how you start to shift boundaries. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by showing you some of the broader boundaries we've shifted as a business by really embracing e-learning. And then I'm actually going to take you under the bonnet and take you through what we do as an e-learning organisation. And you can probably make some of your own decisions about some of the boundaries we might be shifting. And I'll get to that at the end. And it's interesting because some of these boundaries shrink and some of them expand. So just to jump straight into it, to give you a bit of background, I work for the Australian School of Applied Management. We've been around about 14 years now. And we also run Women in Leadership Australia, which is a very important brand and movement within our organisation. That's just celebrated its 12th birthday. And out of those two programs, we do a lot of events work, we do a lot of short course work, but over the years, out of those two brands have developed two what we would call flagship leadership and applied management programs. One of them, the one on the left there, is what we call the AAMC, which is the Australian Applied Management Colloquium. And the one on the right is the Advanced Leadership Program for Women. These are quite big courses. They take 7 to 12 months to work through. And based on the success we've had with those programs in a multitude of sectors, so the health sector, the energy and resources sectors, defence, universities. We've run our programs in universities and in schools and in local government and with state government over the years. We recognised two particular areas where leadership had some juicy potential, and one of those was not that. One of those was the school sector, helping schools develop their leaders, and the other one was based on our work with TAFEs and universities, just education in general, higher education, which is what led to us starting and working with these two brands, Nestle and Nearly. So in case some of you are wondering what that sign on that display out there was, Nearly, Nearly what? It stands for the National Excellence in Educational Leadership Initiative. And as you can see, just below that, we've in June signed a partnership with Monash University, where they are now very graciously awarding a very nice slice of credit into their Masters of Leadership and Masters of Education programs for graduates of our two flagship programs, to the tune of about 25% of that Masters. So they've had a very good look at our courses and the way we run them. And I think it's a very good example of the sorts of partnerships between private education and public education. There's a lot of opportunities there. We're currently exploring how we might also expand to some credit arrangements with MBA providers. Although we do have some requirements around which partners we work with and how they run their courses, just like they have requirements of us. So in terms of those very broad boundaries I mentioned, how have we changed as a business as we've embraced learning technologies and e-learning? To give you a sense of that, in 2014, in terms of the enrolments we had in our 2 flagship programs, excluding all of our events and short courses and specialised in-house programs, we had about 600 enrolments in 2014. Our geographical reach was Australia, and the learning mode was, as you can see, 100% fully face-to-face. Although I want you to look at that term face-to-face carefully, because I'll challenge it a little bit later. I think there has emerged a bit of a false dichotomy between the idea of e-learning and face-to-face learning, and I'll come to that in a little bit. So let's go forward to now, June, so 18 months later, and in 2016 we now have 3,000 enrolments in our flagship programs, so that's a considerable scale up, I'm sure you would agree. Our geographical reach now includes Australia, New Zealand, just about every country in the Asia Pacific, and we've also opened an office in the United States where we service the US and Canada. Our learning mode has changed from 100% face-to-face to now only 15% fully face-to-face. And 85% of what we do with our teaching and learning is either fully online or is in a blended format. I should also add, just with that geographical reach, our CEO and our new international director, Dr. Stephen Brown, they're actually on their way to the UK next week, where we intend to pursue some really interesting partnership opportunities in the United Kingdom and in Europe. What's really important in that kind of scale-up, though, you know, anyone can scale up, it might be said, but our completion rates are above 80% in our flagship programs, and our satisfaction ratings are above 80%. And to some degree, we've had to learn that the hard way. This is the rate we've got them up to now. When you scale up too quickly, and whether that's in numbers and geography, we've learned probably the hard way that if you drop the ball a little bit in terms of student support, it can really hurt you. But luckily we're very agile and we're very quick, and we've been able to really respond to that. So we've certainly shifted our boundaries, not just in terms of what we do with leadership programs, but who we partner with, who we create specialised programs for, our geographical reach, and the number of students that we have. So when I look at the literature on e-learning, and I try to keep up to speed with it, and I look at the white papers that come out and the reports that come out, and these are the sorts of things I see a lot of talk about when it comes to e-learning. I'll just let them all bob up there. And it's not an exhaustive list. To me, most of these things really miss the point. To me, they're, in some cases, quite distracting from what I think really, really matters when it comes to learning technologies and e-learning. You know, in fact, I don't really care about a lot of these things that much, to be honest. Someone might crucify me for saying that, but to me, if we just focus on the learner, and we focus on that learner having a really quality learning experience, these are the things that have mattered to me since about 2002, when e-learning technologies really started to gather pace. And to me that is, do you have access to a really good teacher? Do you have access to a really good facilitator who knows how to facilitate learning and can give you access to really good quality content? That's absolutely important to me. And what about other learners? Do you have access to other learners? Do you have access to a quality social learning opportunity? And is there a quality environment within which the facilitator and the learner and their fellow learners can meet up, interact, learn from each other, and feel safe, but also feel challenged? And quality support. The moment you're doing anything where the learner can't come in and see you face-to-face over a desk, you know, you've really got to look very carefully, as I mentioned, at how you provide quality support for them. So to me, that is everything that counts in our e-learning strategy. I don't really care that much about making really nifty, adaptive, personalised, automated things that we plug into an LMS. To me, the technology is just about connecting learners with other learners, with quality facilitators and quality content. And also, there should be a constant connection to real world. So our e-learning approach should be fed by and feed back into real world needs, whether they're work related, whether they're study related, whatever. It needs to have that really solid connection to the real world. So when I've been working in universities, it's really quite amazing how complicated they can make their e-learning strategy. You've seen the 30, 40, 50-page strategy documents. Here's our teaching and learning approach. Here's our e-learning approach. Well, this is our approach to e-learning right there. There's our strategy. Simple as that. Try to create really profound learning experiences. Develop and make available as much as you can really cutting-edge, contemporary, 21st century content, and make sure that your engagement and support mechanisms are really, really robust. And what we've found is as long as you constantly reevaluate what you're doing in this space according to those three criteria, you can't go wrong. Well, you can always go wrong. But this really has helped us stay on track, scale up, and do this with really quality satisfaction ratings and really good completion rates. But as Susie very generously mentioned when she was introducing me, I have a very solid learning design background. And for those of you who are a bit sick of learning designers, you know, some of you may end up leaving a little bit into this meeting because I do go on a bit about learning design. You need to have a quality learning design to really underpin what it is you're trying to do online. And I'll try to be very, very brief with this. I will be around at lunchtime if anyone wants to ask me any more detailed questions about this, because you could have a 1.5 hour session just on this chart right here. But for us, it's a matter of working through this cycle here. And for those of you who are familiar with educational theory, Kolb's experiential learning cycle probably looks pretty similar to something like this. It also has a little bit in common with the whole idea of cognitive apprenticeship. But what probably stands out is our overriding focus on dialogic learning. That's at the core, at the heart of what we do. So we begin the process at a module level. In all modules, we apply this approach. It's all about helping the learner connect to the topical focus of the module, activating their schema, helping them to relate things to previous experiences, and using that really important priority that David Alsterbell points out, that you can't really teach anyone anything if you don't know what they already know. So find out at the beginning of whatever you do what the learners already know, help them relate it to previous experience, show them what the challenge and the objectives is going to be. Moving on then, we go into guided exploration where we provide them with some really expert content, and you know, we start to promote a little bit of initial inquiry and exploration, and a bit of critical thinking. From there, our method flips, and it's not the traditional flip that you're more familiar with this idea of flipped learning, but it's a flip between the asynchronous and the synchronous. So what we've looked at to this point is very much asynchronous. It's in a learning portal. And then we flip over into what we call more of the synchronous, live, active stuff. So when we get into facilitated investigation, we do that through live, fully interactive webinar workshops. And then from there, they take these learnings and they take these ideas and they go back out into their workplace and they try these things out. They reflect on it and they see how much they can accommodate that into their awareness and knowledge structure. And that's sort of our learning approach in a nutshell. And as I said, in the centre of it is this focus on dialogic learning. And that is, I think, is it Robin Alexander in the UK is quite well known for promoting this idea of dialogic teaching. And it's basically, as again, this is another one you could have a half-an-hour session just on this one. But it's the idea that the teaching and the learning methodology focuses on dialogue, through dialogue, for dialogue. And to some degree, this is linked to our focus as a subject area around leadership and management. Don't you dare call it a soft skill, because anyone who's tried to do leadership will tell you it's pretty hard. But it is really a communicative subject area. So actually using a learning methodology that focuses on talk, on collaboration, on exploration, and really emphasising that difference between dialogic and dialectic. We try to focus much more on the dialogic, not the dialectic, not the instrumental. We're not trying to form a consensus around one idea. We're trying to open things up and be open to a multitude of ideas. Now, what that looks like in terms of an actual approach looks a bit like that. The same colour coding with the connection, the guided exploration, the facilitated investigation, and then the real-world application. Basically, I'm going to go quickly through this one. I'm happy to show it to anyone later because it would take a fair while to explain. Basically, there's a lot of connecting going on here, a lot of focus on ongoing discussion. And we have a big emphasis also on peer coaching. So peer coaching is a constant element in all our courses, and it really becomes another form of glue throughout the progression of a course. As I said, that's quite a complicated thing there. We could talk all day about how that works. What I want to focus your attention on, though, and what I think makes us special, is our overwhelming focus on synchronous learning. And you won't find a whole lot of e-learning providers standing up saying, that's the heart of our approach. It is for us. Without this, we don't feel that our courses do much at all. So we invest a lot of time and effort and expense on making this really, really happen. In terms of what it looks like for the learners, I've just taken you under the hood and shown you some of the stuff under the hood. For them, it's pretty straightforward. It sort of comes out as a flow like this. I'll just very quickly just show you what those elements look like to walk through that learning methodology. So at the beginning, we have a connection. We start by asking them some simple questions. We start to get them thinking about what they think they already know, or what sort of real-world experiences they might be able to relate this back to. The guided exploration, using that principle of cutting-edge 21st century content, at least 90% of the content that we put in front of learners has a video component, has a multimedia component. And we do provide them with a lot of readings and a lot of texts, but it's a kind of general rule for us that you should be providing something audio-visual. And a lot of these are micro lectures. They're 4 to 5 minutes long, not much beyond that. And we've got a very, very talented multimedia crew who provide motion graphics and put these into the micro lectures. I think one of the interesting things that we do with the motion graphics is we don't tell the multimedia team at first what to show. What we actually say is, watch the video for yourself. As a visual thinker, tell us how you think this should be depicted, which is a really interesting way of going about it, because they're not academic people. They don't have an academic background, our multimedia people, but they do have a visual thinking and awareness background. We've generated in the last 12 months about 400 of these micro lectures with the motion graphics, with a multimedia team of 3. So they've been really quite productive. And if you consider the fact that they also manage, record, and edit up to 50 live webinars a week, this is probably one of the most productive multimedia teams I've not only worked with, but ever heard of. They are colossally productive and quality driven. After they've gone through some of those those micro lectures and looked at the prompts that encouraged them to reflect in relation to themselves, as well as go back into the workplace and try a couple of things out. We then do this sort of gathering where we say, this is important, what we do here. We show them all the prompts again and give them a reminder of all the things they've looked at, but they then select what they think matters to talk about to the group. So they will self-select what resonates for them or what they feel has been big for them, and they'll share that with the group asynchronously in a discussion forum format. And this all leads into the live webinar, which looks like this. This is a typical example. We use Zoom. I'm sure many of you have heard of Zoom. When I was at the University of Melbourne, in that role there, we checked out a variety of tools. I think they ended up going with the Blackboard version. But when we trialled Zoom, I was just so impressed with the quality of the video and the audio that once I moved over to Australian School of Applied Management, I took that with me, and we've made excellent use of it. This is a cohort of higher education professional staff who are doing a Women in Leadership course with us. And you can see these webinars go from anywhere from an hour to 2 hours, and they are very, very discursive. There'll be a review of their feelings and thoughts in relation to the guided exploration. But in every one of these sessions, we have what we call a burning question, where we'll throw down the gauntlet a bit and really challenge the group. We also make extensive use of breakout rooms. So you're all familiar with breakout rooms, I hope, yes? So at various points in these live sessions, we'll hit the breakout rooms function, and groups of 3 or 4 will be selected, and they'll have private conversations in their group of 3 or 4 before returning back to the broader group. Once they've had their live webinar, within the next week they are invited back into the portal again to say, well, now they've had a bit of time to think about it and a bit of time to sort of absorb some of that, where are you now? What are you noticing now? What are you thinking about now? And of course, because we deal with working people who are very busy, both professionally and with their family lives, they can't always make the synchronous session, of course. So we make sure we record them and we edit them nicely. We don't just throw this raw video file up into the portal. We edit it nicely and make sure it's quite presentable. And we re-embed that back in the learning portal so that if you've missed the live session, you can go and watch it and learn from it. Or if you want to just review, you may have made the synchronous session, but you'd like to review it, or there's something you can recall and you'd like to go back and hear it again or check it out. And this technology allows us to work in-house as well. So this is a group of teachers at an independent school in rural, regional New South Wales. I actually facilitate that group myself, and I'm beaming into a room that they gather in together, and there's a swivel camera there and there's a room mic, and it really feels like you're standing in the room. It really feels like you're standing there in front of them when you're talking. And given that they are so far away and they're so remote, to be able to have this level of live connectivity with them and to do group work with them, in that room is just really quite phenomenal. As I said, we always follow up with some sort of real-world application, some sort of toolkit based on that module's topic or focus. Take this back out into your workplace, try it out with your team, or try it out with your particular work responsibilities. We have one of those in every module. And as I mentioned, the peer coaching. Now, when I said peer coaching, we don't just say pair up, be buddies and coach each other. We actually use a professional coach who teaches our participants how to coach. And you can see the breakdown there of a typical course. We put the peer coaching elements in at distributed points, and it gradually scales up in terms of the demands of it, and we teach people how to be coaches, basically, for their peers. Now, that's important in our field because we're in the leadership field, and being a leader and being a good manager, you need to know how to coach people, so that's natural. But from what I'm seeing from our participants, I actually think there's a lot to recommend this kind of method for any kind of subject. That if you can teach learners how to coach each other in the learning process, there's an enormous amount of good comes out of that. We get a lot of qualitative survey responses from participants saying that this was probably the most special part of the course for them, that capacity to pair up with someone and to know how to actually help them and to be helped by them. Now, a boundary that has shifted massively for us is how we handle faculty. So those dots that are appearing on the map there, you can see that we've got faculty in most capital cities in Australia. We've got a faculty member in Karratha, who's fantastic. We've got faculty in Tasmania and New Zealand. We've got a number of them in the United States, where we run programs now in the United States, but some of them beam in and run sessions with our Australian cohorts or our New Zealand cohorts. We have just found that we have a massive resource there in terms of finding really top-class qualified faculty and facilitators to run our courses. It's been phenomenal. How am I going for time? Something that a lot of people in e-learning would be familiar with is analytics. Again, that's not something that, to be honest, we pay a whole lot of attention to in terms of what time they visited, how many times they visited, how many times they watched this lecture over that. I'm really not that interested in that. What I am interested in is at the core of our approach, which is dialogic learning. I want to know how the interaction happens in the synchronous sessions. So what we do is we have a quality assurance person. She's in Canada, again, shows our reach. And what she does is she goes through every recording of every webinar we do, and at 5-minute junctures, she measures, or she indicates who's talking and what kind of talk is it. So is it the facilitator talking or is it a participant? And if it's the facilitator, are they presenting information, or are they prompting and inquiring and setting something up for the learners to talk about, or are they responding to the participants? And if it's a participant talking, what I just described was all the purple stuff. And if it's a participant talking, well, are they responding to the facilitator? Are they responding to each other? Or are they actually jumping in and bringing something new to this discussion? Now, as you can see from that set of the graphs there, you can also then just break that down to the purple bit being presentation only based stuff from the facilitator, the middle ground being interaction but primarily driven by the actual facilitator, and the gold is really the participant driven interaction. Now, if you can see where the white line is there, by actually gathering this data, I was able to actually sit our faculty down in about June last year and say, so we're all about dialogic learning, are we? We're all about interaction and about participant-driven conversations, yes? Yes. So why are you guys doing all the talking and driving and controlling all the interaction? And they looked at this and they went, wow, yeah, I had no idea. And you can see what happened after that intervention, I suppose you could call it. What happens to the gold there is sometimes it's all just about creating awareness for people. You might think you're being highly interactive and highly participant, inviting them into this process, but really you're sort of still running the show for the whole time. And when you actually show them that, they actually are moved to start changing their teaching methodology to be more inclusive and more open to the participants becoming part of that process. They're really the only analytics that we're all that concerned with. In order to have quality facilitation, you need to have quality standards. These are our standards for online synchronous and asynchronous facilitation. They cover what we expect from our faculty. Now, let me make this clear. We're not, in terms of your content knowledge and your expertise, and sometimes that's research expertise, we're not pretending to have any notion or say in that. But in terms of how you go about your teaching and learning, here's what research and our own experience shows us works for our participants. So before, in the lead up to a synchronous session, during the synchronous session, and as a follow-up to the synchronous session, here are the standards we expect you to maintain. And we've described them to you. We've actually broken it down into a series of elements. We've said why we think that's important. We've given you a rationale. We've shown you in the blue column what is a standard, a minimum standard that we want to achieve. To the left of that is where you might be slipping and be below that standard as a descriptor. And the one on the right is when you're significantly above that standard. And if you're significantly above the standard, well, we actually find ways to reward you and we remunerate you better. And the blue column as opposed to the purple column is the difference between an associate and a senior associate in the way we allocate work, the way we remunerate the work. And at first when I did this, I thought, oh, this is really big brother. The faculty are really not going to like this. But I sat down with our core faculty and they went, no, this is fair enough. This is quality. This is about quality. And when I showed it to some of our associate faculty, some of them called me up and thanked me. And I thought, oh, God, that's good. But they said, it's so nice to know what you expect. It's so nice to know what might be a good pedagogical approach and a good supportive approach for students. Because no one's ever told me before. No one's ever actually sort of clearly mapped that out for me. So this has been a big success for us. We also have collaborative spaces for faculty. I'll go faster for the last bit. I'm on the home run. So when we do live webinars, we record them, we put them up in the portal for the learners, but we also put them in a dedicated faculty space so all faculty can see everyone's sessions. And then they reflect on that session. What worked here? What did I struggle with? What did I feel went well? And their colleagues can then give them feedback. We actually have that built into our standards, that you have to be willing to reflect on your facilitation. You have to be willing to give other people feedback on their facilitation. Running out of time, but this is our client experience framework, our client support, sorry. Really quite detailed. It results, we focus on how do we support people after they enroll, how do we support them while they're doing the course, how do we support them as they're getting towards the end and actually finish their course. And we don't just focus on tick boxes. We focus on creating personal relationships with the learners. We focus on ways of helping them if they need realignment or remediation throughout the course of their work. And that results in, for each cohort, a checklist of 83 items, which our client experience team check through and do. Some of these are sending them an SMS or sending them an email or calling them up. Some of them actually involve the engagement and support person calling all 25 people in the cohort. So it's a very involved support process, but this is what's really boosted our completion ratings. Happy to talk to you more in depth. And for those of you, so we've got some people who are actually enrolled in our courses, you'll see this for yourself, what a big impact the support process makes. I'll just skip the evaluation and just go to the last bit here. This is important. In terms of how they rate their experience, our participants rate their experience. We call this the zone. Now, for those of you who have heard of Vygotsky and the zone of proximal development, we heard about that this morning. We talk about the zone of proximal dependence. And that line there is how they rate us in their surveys after every module. You know, the content, did it meet their expectations? Was it a engaging experience? Was the content relevant to me? That line there represents, on a module-by-module basis, their rating of us. That lavender, I suppose you'd call it, line, is probably more interesting to me because that is the self-rating, the self-assessment. And when they're asked to self-assess, how well did you prepare? How much effort did you put in? How collaborative were you? How supportive of the group? Were you, involved in building a community of inquiry and practice here? Rate yourself on these scales. And inevitably, people come into our courses rating themselves quite low on those scales. But if by the end of a course, they're actually rating themselves and their collaborative efforts as highly or even higher than they rate our efforts, to me, this means we've done a great job. To me, this means we've removed their dependence on us to help them with their leadership development. And to me, that closure of that gap there is a very important one. So how are we stretching boundaries? I'm stretching Susie's tolerance right now, I'll tell you what. We've really shrunk and tightened what we feel are our goals and priorities in terms of what we're trying to do in this space. We've made synchronous dialogic learning really the heart of our approach, and work-integrated learning the end goal of the approach. We're capitalising on the opportunities to have a global faculty, not just a geographically based faculty. We're setting new and better standards for online facilitation. We're facilitating a community of inquiry and practice in our own faculty as e-learning practitioners. We're focusing all our analytics on what we call interactional dynamics, what's actually happening in the space between learners and teacher. We're trying to set new standards for the kinds of support and engagement that we provide to our learners. And we're re-examining what we feel success means in learning. And it's not just how they rate us, but how they rate themselves by the end of a course, which I haven't seen many providers do or take as a really serious consideration in how they evaluate the success of their courses. So on that note, I thank you very much. I know I went fast through some of the detail. I'll be around for the rest of the day if anyone would love to have a talk about any of this or ask me any specific questions. And I'm sorry, Susie. Thank you.